The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazines. Today we have a legend in the South, a legend across America. His name is West Fraser, and he's going to teach you painting the color of light. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is West Fraser, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm up here in Mount Desert Island in Maine with a group of painters, the Plein Air Painters of America. And I'm visiting with you today to give you a short demonstration of how I would approach painting. I'm here at Thurston's Lobster Pound next to the Thurston 5th generation wharf, and I wanted to try to capture the feel of the working waterfront. I'm here to do a demonstration for you, and to start with that, I would like to begin by saying that composition is the most important start of a painting, and so I encourage you to consider doing thumbnails to work out your compositions. And so a thumbnail would be just a rough sketch that works out your compositional elements. And so I am going to start with a couple of the major shapes that are involved in this composition that I've picked out. They don't have to be absolutely exact. You're just trying to work out some ideas before you get started. Of course, while you're painting, you will be adjusting the actual detail work that you have to use in your painting. And so as long as you have the good material to start with, then that's what you're after. So there, as I suspected, this is going to make a nice composition for my 11 by 14 canvas, and I'll edit out. The thing about plein air painting is all about editing, so we don't want everything that's out there in the picture. So I'd say that that's probably about an 11 by 14. So that's the, I won't be faithful to this anymore, but I know that I've got a good place to start, and I've got the elements I need to create a fantastic painting. Okay, I'll start by discussing my palette. I'll start with the white. I use a titanium and zinc mixture already mixed, and then I use a Payne's gray. and a blue violet and French ultramarine, cerulean blue. The French ultramarine is the warm blue, the cerulean is the cool blue, the viridian green is a cool green, the sap green is a warm green, and the permanent green light is a very strong green. And then I use a sienna, burnt sienna, for an earth tone red, reddish orange. The alizarin crimson for a cool red, and I use a dark and a light red so that I can play with the light red, especially so I can really push the intensities and the differences between the intensities in my mixtures. And I use a cad orange and a cad yellow deep. The cad yellow deep is warmer than the cad yellow light. So for the cool passages when I need it, I use cad yellow light. And the burnt sienna and yellow ochre. And then I use a Naples yellow, and that's usually the color of the light on a sunny day. Now, we don't have a sunny day today, so I'll be pushing the values and the transitions from up close warm darks into the cooler darks in the distance, and it's all pretty much a cooler kind of a day, which is fine. We'll have fun. Now, generally I have a panel that is already toned, but the last one I pulled out of the box was not already toned. So we're going to quickly tone this canvas, and I like to put a dark edge around the outside so that I contain my eye, and then when I'm painting, I know not to push important elements off to the edge that far. So that helps me maintain a better composition, and I don't lose good elements on the exterior edges. And then I just like to use a good warm tone, and the reason for a tone is very important, is to keep this white from popping through once you're finished, because you can literally just sit around and try to cover up white spots if you're not careful. So I'll get this in here. There. Now, I've used my medium, which is a drying medium, and it's a mixture of the Gamblin Galkid to basically 50% mineral spirits, or Gamsol is their product, and then I put in a little, about a 5% of refined linseed oil, and it's been working for me pretty well. So the panel is toned. We've got the thumbnail sketch. I know I've got everything I need to work out a pretty decent composition here. So let's see. I'm going to, first of all, you start off with your darks, and in oil painting you always go basically from thin darks to thick highlights. So I've got my sketch. So I just want to, you don't have to be too faithful to it, but since I've already worked out a lot of that information, I might as well use it to get started. Now, I better go back to my subject here. Now in the early stages, you can use your different colors so that you create little shorthand passages so that you remember where you are in your drawing. But you don't want to get too much thick paint down, and you also do not want to use any white paint in the beginning. So I'm basically trying to get my darks in before, so that I have something to work with. And then when you have your darks, then you have a place to paint around and paint into. And the darks, or I say darks, they're also could easily just be referred to as your midtones. And the idea is to get enough pigment to work with, to paint around, to also to make sure that you know where you are as you're painting, where you are in the painting, because very soon here this is going to get complicated. Now to separate the traps there, I introduce a little bit of green so that, again, so that I know where I am. Look at, maybe try to refine the shape of this hull just a little bit. Okay, so the challenge today with this setting, as I said, was that it's a lot of coolness, a lot of grayness, and so my challenge or my problem to be solved is to fade the background behind the foreground. So I'm going to have much darker in here on the stern of the boat, and the warm darks underneath here are going to, and then eventually it's going to step back as we go into the distance. And there's a wonderful old Nova Scotia boat just behind my main subject, and it's a blue. So I picked this partially because of the simplicity of the color combinations, because you've got an orange and black in the boat in the foreground, and then the blue boat directly behind it. And so you've got the complements of blue and orange, which mixed together make black. And so the rest of the composition is basically in the gray family, different kinds of grays. And so sometimes the simplest of compositions are the strongest, and the simplest of color harmonies can be the strongest as well. Now I liked the Canadian Mist, which is that blue Nova Scotia boat in the background, when it was stern to. So I'm just going to put a blue passage there for a second. And I can paint around it, but I want that blue there because I want to start establishing some of my color intensities. All right, so I'm going to, the most intense colors, and I'm saying don't use white, but I'm going to put a note here of this orange top sides on this boat so that I have some color notes to work with. And I'm going to drag it across just a little bit there. So as you look at angles, they are the same on the canvas that they are as you put your brush up there. Now that's about the arc of that cabin top. And then you've got a little orange passage down there, which is going to be duller, so I'm mixing it with this blue on my palette. It's duller. The blue and orange can work for this rigging here. Put a little dark in there. So part of what you do in the beginning is you're drawing, and as I might be putting down a dark passage, or I might put down a dark orange with the burnt sienna as if it's metal that's been rusted. But all of this is so that you have something to work with, as well as so that you know where you are in your painting. All right, so that establishes the hauling mechanism, which I will work on a little bit later. Now let's go in here and work on this dark. Of the traps. Put that in a little bit more substantially. Okay, now we need to establish a tone back here for the tree line. And I've cooled it out and lightened it up. It's not always how you see it. There's a lot of things that I would hope to share with you, that it's not necessarily about direct observation, although direct observation is absolutely crucial and it's really the main reason why we plein air paint. Because what I learned by doing this, not only am I working on my drawing skills, but I'm standing here soaking up observation of this situation and watching the different weather patterns pass by. And so after the 30-something years of painting, you've got a wealth of information that helps with developing paintings in the studio at the easel from these small studies. And it also, over time, you learn how to simplify and codify the elements in a painting.
Streamline Premium Art Video presents West Fraser, creating the color of light. Artists struggle with light, how to get the correct values, how to make the painting look like the light they are seeing, and how to master the color of light, whether that color is on a gray or a sunlit day. West Fraser is more than a master painter. He's a storyteller who has mastered the art of making his paintings tell a story, evoke emotion, and hold the viewer's attention. You'll join West as he paints outdoors on location in plein air, teaching you to paint from observation and study, using the principles and elements of visual design that are relevant today as they were 100 years ago. You'll learn how West uses dynamic shapes and colors to mimic light and atmospheric effects, and how he uses the environment to influence his decision-making process, and how to capture the atmospheric conditions and the nuances of light to support the poetry of the painting. Join this American icon who is not only an accomplished master painter, but is an excellent instructor who shares his lifetime of painting experience and his tips and techniques. Watch him paint a fishing boat step by step from a composition drawing through the finished painting. You'll also meet the artist in an in-depth interview, and you'll view an exhibit of his paintings. By following his instruction, you're bound to see improvements in your own work. Creating the Color of Light with West Fraser, part of the Plein Air Painters of America series from Streamline Premium Art Video. That is West Fraser and Painting the Color of Light. You can learn more about that video at lilyartvideo.com, where we have a special discount code in the comments section. I really enjoyed interviewing West. Let's get right to that interview. We're here tonight with West Fraser, and West, I'm curious to understand a little bit about what makes you tick and what makes you paint. I'd like to understand a little bit about some history, where you started. So let's start there.
Okay, history. Let's see. I got a degree from the University of Georgia in commercial art and illustration, because at that time the university programs were not teaching representational painting. So I moved into that program and worked commercially for a few years, and then soon found that I was interested in more than what I was doing, what I'd been taught, and I started painting outdoors. So I've done that since 1989, 1988 probably. And so let's see, in 1984 I moved to Charleston. I've made that my home, and I have developed a career in the South and nationally. I've just finished my 8th one-man museum exhibition, solo exhibition, and that was at the Telfair Museum in Savannah, Georgia.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big feat, and tough to get ready for.
Indeed, indeed. It was a good one for me. It was my hometown, basically. And that's it. I'm basically self-taught. I've never taken anybody's instruction except for my college days. And so I've taught myself to paint. So I guess I look at painting sometimes a little bit differently than some people.
How so?
Well, I was never told what you're supposed to do, which I think is a good way to approach things. So I've developed my own bad habits and good habits and approaches, and I'm still learning. So I guess if I'm being self-taught, I'm still always learning something. But I think I bring to plein air painting a perspective that's a little bit different.
Now, you also do a lot of studio painting.
Probably for the last 2 years, I've gone back. To be an artist, you tend to be, you go through transitions. I don't think there's many artists throughout history that have stayed the same for their whole careers. I've certainly gone through some transitions, and for the last 2 years I have been working back towards working in the studio more. For all these years I've been working at larger paintings from field studies, and now I'm doing that more than I used to. But for
how big in the field? What's the largest you'll do in the field?
I'm still doing pieces. An average size for me is 24-30. I'll take a 30-40 and get them started. And I like to get big paintings started in the image, or like you can walk into the painting.
You can't get that from a photograph.
You don't get that from a photograph. And of course, for the 18 years of pure plein air painting, that's all I did and that's all I sold. You know, that's the learning curve. And from that, you know, art is about experience, or the maturity of an artist is about their experience. And so combining that now with the combinations of creating more exhibition paintings, to taking canvases, working the first stop to creative thinking is the word should. So, you know, there's no rules.
I want to back up for just a second. I'm curious to understand what it was that got you interested in art. So you started in college officially, but were you doing it as a child?
I did start doing some as a child, painting and drawing. It was a contemplative period for me, and I used my natural penchant or my natural interest to find private time and contemplation time as a youth. Now, I did tell my aunt when I was 13, after her inquiry as to what I was interested in doing, I told her I was going to be an artist, and that and basically I'm doing exactly now what I said I would do when I was 13. Now, teenage years got in the way of serious study of art, but I just had a natural interest, a natural ability with it. I did come from a family that was not necessarily exposed to a lot of art. I grew up in Georgia and South Carolina, and the museum where I just had an exhibition, the Telfair in Savannah, was the first museum I ever went into as a child. So
that makes it even more special that they had this show there.
Yeah.
Well, when I was 8 or 9, we went to the New York World's Fair, and on that trip, my mom and dad took us to the Frick in New York. It's the first time I'd ever been in a museum. And I remember seeing a large painting of pirates battling, and swords and swashbucklers. And as a kid, you know, that's cool stuff. But it was the first I'd been exposed to painting, and I was never able to forget that image, that painting, and all the passion in it. And that was, to me, what planted the seed. Was there a painting or exposure to any particular art that did that for you?
Well, in that one museum, there's a Brandt painting of a war scene. So as a young boy with a grandfather who was an Army general, and you know, for me, playing Army and everything was all very important with me and my friends and my brothers, and typical childhood like we all had. And seeing a grand war scene at the Telfair was a very important experience. And then I'd say I was probably influenced by some illustrators. There were some illustrators that moved to my hometown, and that had retired there or had moved from New York to be there. And they sort of took me under their wing, and I just would chat with them. They didn't teach me any painting, but I would visit them. I was interested, I was curious, and I would go and visit in their studio, and they would talk to me about the world of art. And so that's sort of how they showed me that you could be a professional and that you could make it a profession.
So today, what artist would you have loved to have met? If you could pick anyone in history, and what would you ask him?
I would like to have met Joaquin Sorolla, and I would ask him how in the world did he get that big canvas out to the beach. No,
the one with the fish and the pen and the boat.
You know, Anders Zorn, the Swede. I would ask him how in the world, I would like to know how he did the watercolors that he did that are so incredibly beautiful and realistic. Probably for me, one of the biggest influences was just a coffee table book that my parents had. And that was Andrew Wyeth's book of Kirchner's Farm. And to see that someone was painting realistically in a time of abstract expressionism in the early 60s, to me was refreshing. And I was lost sometimes in that book. And but you know, I didn't go to a lot of museums when I was a youth. And I'm also, when I say I'm self-taught, that's exactly what I am, basically. Now, I've certainly been to as many museums as I could possibly manage since then and made my study of art, but it was not something that was presented to me as a youth.
Down the road, when somebody's researching you 100 years from now, what is the one thing that they will never find in their research, something that only you know about yourself that you can share with us?
That when I start a painting, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I just do it, and I let it flow. I let the intuition drive it now. That I don't have any set method of how I'm going to approach a painting or preconceived notion. So that would be one thing. Personally, I don't think there's anything.
Nothing you're
I'm an open book.
Nothing you're willing to talk about. We have a number of people who are watching this who are learning, studying, trying to get to another level. What advice do you have for people who want to paint, who want to grow?
Trust your instincts. Try to figure out how to make the painting yourself. Find people to study with, but with that also spend time trying to creatively come up with solutions on how to execute the painting. That way, with the combination of the two, from advice from other artists, study from other artists, and really digging in deep to try to figure out how to solve the problems with the two, then you develop the history and the experience. And once you feel like you've gained experience and you've got all this information that you've taken in on how to, then start trusting yourself and trusting your instincts, and don't be afraid of making a mistake. Everybody makes a mistake and everybody makes a flop. And in fact, there's sometimes no such thing as a mistake. With a mistake, you might find a new discovery.
One of the benefits of being a painter today is that there's lots of opportunities to learn, lots of workshops. There are workshop junkies who go from one workshop to another, and they're getting a lot of exposure to lots of different styles. This week, videotaping many different artists together, one after another. One is extremely tight, another is extremely loose, another approaches things with big shapes, another with small details, etc. How do you ultimately find your own voice rather than, getting the confusion of, which one do I become? How do I become myself rather than, being a copy of this painter or that painter?
Well, it sort of goes back to my advice that I was just talking about. And I strongly believe that the creative mind works not in a void, because you've got all the information that's come into you, all of your studies, everything you've read, everything you've seen. But there comes a point where if you approach problem solving with a set of circumstances that you assume or that you are preconceived, then you are not going to find your voice, your own personal voice. So again, it's if you find that you are, after you've made your study, if you find that you're still hearing the voices of one approach was this and one approach was this, and this is what you're supposed to do and this is what you should do, if you're still hearing that, then you really just need to meditate until that goes away. Contemplate. There's some artists I know of who will say a prayer before they paint. Clear your head and build and get to the point of, or give yourself the confidence that you can achieve it. I strongly believe that positive confidence that you can achieve the painting is a large percentage of success of making a good painting. Certainly in plein air. If you're living in fear that you can't get it, you're not going to go anywhere. And if you're looking for your own voice, you have to let it flow. You don't develop your own voice until you've got the experience behind you, so that you no longer struggle with how am I going to achieve this. If you're still in that stage, you need to keep studying. Eventually, to find your own voice and to where your personality and your emotion shows through, is when the painting becomes automatic, intuitive, subconscious. The decisions are made subconsciously. It's very important to let your subconscious, that's the opening of the mind, that's the opening up your mind to creativity. It's very important to let the subconscious make some of those decisions and don't question them. And that goes back to the mistakes. If you're afraid to just make a decision or to take an action without a rational contemplation, then you're not letting your subconscious make decisions. So you don't have to have a rational reason for every stroke or every decision you make. But you do have to have the experience of being able to mix your paint or mix your values so that you can mix it and your brain is telling you to do something and you mix it and you put it on.
In other words, what you're saying is you got to get to the point where you don't have to think about technique. You get the technique down so that you can let your yourself come through it. Is that?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And that it's not necessarily the technique, but it's also the skills. There's lots of techniques.
Big difference, isn't there?
Yeah. There's a big difference. And you can learn techniques from different artists. But the skill set is knowing how your palette works. Your palette is your keyboard. And you have to know your paints, and you have to use them the same way for years, so that it's no longer a decision of how do I mix that color. That, it should be, you have to get, and that's just experience. There's absolutely no substitute for experience, and there's no way to get experience without hard work. I know that there's a lot of people who are very interested in painting that only have X amount of time. So, it takes longer to get that experience, but eventually the experience will come. And if you're 80 years old by the time you've got that experience, you will enjoy your final 10 or 15 years painting that much more. But there's no substitute for the experience that a seasoned, mature artist has developed.
Any final thoughts for our viewers in terms of advice or other things that painters should be considering?
Before you want to start painting, learn to draw. Okay? Because painting is drawing with a brush. And if you are at the point, if you can't direct your hand and eye coordination to apply the brush, then you can't paint. And if you can't draw and learn to develop your hand and eye coordination to draw, then you can't paint.
Best way to learn drawing is?
Drawing, and study and instruction. But there's no shortcut. You have to learn to draw.
Excellent. Wes, thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, that was West Fraser, Painting the Color of Light. And you can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. And remember, there's a special discount code in the comments section. Thank you for watching today. Hope you enjoyed it.
Streamline Premium Art Video presents West Fraser, Creating the Color of Light. Artists struggle with light, how to get the correct values, how to make the painting look like the light they are seeing, and how to master the color of light, whether that color is on a gray or a sunlit day. West Fraser is more than a master painter. He's a storyteller who has mastered the art of making his paintings tell a story, evoke emotion, and hold the viewer's attention. You'll join West as he paints outdoors on location in plein air, teaching you to paint from observation and study, using the principles and elements of visual design that are relevant today as they were 100 years ago. You'll learn how West uses dynamic shapes and colors to mimic light and atmospheric effects, and how he uses the environment to influence his decision-making process, and how to capture the atmospheric conditions and the nuances of light to support the poetry of the painting. Join this American icon who is not only an accomplished master painter, but is an excellent instructor who shares his lifetime of painting experience and his tips and techniques. Watch him paint a fishing boat step by step from a composition drawing through the finished painting. You'll also meet the artist in an in-depth interview, and you'll view an exhibit of his paintings. By following his instruction, you're bound to see improvements in your own work. Creating the Color of Light with West Fraser, part of the Plein Air Painters of America series from Streamline Premium